Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be concluding our discussion on the Poison X storyline as we take a look at Venom number 163. So, last time on Poison X. So, Venom and the X-Men were on the tail of Killer Thrill and her men, and thankfully, they managed to catch up with her as they infiltrated her ship via, I guess I can say, an ice comet? I don't know. Basically, they threw a big chunk of ice in it with them inside. They threw a big chunk of ice at Killer Thrill's ship with them inside, and so they were able to infiltrate it. So after taking care of her crew on the lower decks, Jean was able to use her psychic powers to read the minds of one of them and figure out where Corsair and the Starjammers are. As such, the team wound up splitting up to kind of cover more ground, with Cyclops going to go save his dad and the remaining Starjammers, while Venom and the other X-Men went to go deal with Killer Thrill and her men. For the most part, both teams kind of encountered some resistance, both ultimately were successful, as Scott managed to find his dad and they had a heartfelt reunion, while Venom and the remaining X-Men managed to deal with Killer Thrill and her men. However, in the midst of all this, another ship wound up coming up to Killer Thrill. Thrill's and wound up docking. Killer Thrill, believing it was the Brood here to collect their bounty, managed to slip away and go meet up with them, and Jean wanted to make sure that Killer Thrill couldn't cause any more problems, wound up chasing after her onto the other ship. Unfortunately, when the pair wound up meeting up there, they found that the owner of this ship wasn't the Brood, but was in fact the poison Craven the Hunter, who was talking about how he was lamenting that symbiotes are fighting symbiotes and all that crap, and thus offered Jean and Killer Thrill a means to end this. Though, of course, he also said that if they didn't take it willingly, he would force it on them, and basically, that's basically the whole consuming/assimilation thing that the poisons do, as Jean and Killer Thrill were surrounded by little poisons and unfortunately were taken, which the X-Men all quickly feel as the psychic link that Jean had them all share gets cut almost immediately. And as everyone's positing what the heck's going on, well, last issue ended with Venom and the other X-Men coming face to face with Jean and Killer Thrill as they go back to meet up with them, and Jean making it clear on no uncertain terms that they were all going to that they were all next in line for assimilation. So that's where today's issue begins, because, well, since these are poisons, Venom knows exactly what they are, and he is now rightfully scared, because, well, all it takes is a touch of one little poison and everybody's screwed, and, well, everybody in this immediate area has a symbiote. Venom, the X-Men, the remainder of Killer Thrill's men, all of them are now prime real estate for these things. Also, Poison Craven is there. He wasn't there at the end of the last issue, but he's here now, so he's here to help the process. And Jean even admits that she knew the X-Men long enough to know that even if they offered this whole thing, they wouldn't go without a fight, so probably just best to take them now. Now, as such, the X-Men, of course, are wondering what the hell's going on. They're looking at this and pretty much just seeing what the heck's happened to Jean. Like, just, why is she all now armored now? But, yeah, Venom is just telling them, we need to run. We need to run now, because those are the poisons, those are prime examples of why you should have gotten rid of those symbiotes while you had the chance, because now they're no longer a boost, they are a liability. And as such, the fight immediately begins as Jean orders the little poisons to take the X-Men, and Venom has to keep throwing them aside and just basically smacking away all the little poisons, as he has to tell the X-Men basically the abridged version of what the poisons do. That they consume symbiotes and their hosts, and that all it takes is for one of the little ones to touch you, and you'll become just like Jean, completely consumed, and basically everything you were metastasized and absorbed into the poisons, until the only thing left of you are your powers and maybe some scraps of your personality. So yeah, basically everybody's fucked. As the X-Men tried their best to fend off the poisons but unfortunately, it's a little hard, because again, they have to get creative with taking the poisons down, because they can't get in direct contact with the little ones without being absorbed, and while Iceman tries to hold them off using an ice wall, unfortunately, Killer Thrill managed to use her own natural abilities to break through the ice and free her cohorts, and unfortunately, her men were caught in the ice wall as well, and sadly, the fact that they're stuck in there now makes them prime targets for the poisons. And yep, Killer Thrill's men also get consumed and are getting part of the fold, which in turn increases the poison's ranks even more. And to make matters worse, because Jean Grey is on the poison's side now, she's able to use her psychic powers to hold Venom. She's able to use her psychic powers to hold Venom and the X-Men in place so that the little poisons get close to them. However, before they can be consumed as well, help arrives in the form of Cyclops and the Starjammers. And of course, the instant Cyclops sees Jean, well, he's kind of heartbroken, like, oh my god, what the heck happened to you? Jean, are you okay? What's going on? Basically, he's like, why can't... Like, he's trying to wrap his head around on what's happened to Jean. He's even asking, I can't feel our psychic link anymore. And of course, Jean tries coercing him, saying, you can feel it again. All you have to do is become part of this with me. But yeah, Venom manages to knock Cyclops out of it, as he manages to pull him away, as he tells everyone they have to make a run for it, and even shoots a web line to pull Cyclops away. And while Cyclops wants to go back for Jean, Venom has to once again tell him that's not Jean anymore. Because again, whenever the poisons consume someone, they literally consume them. Jean is gone. That is not Jean, and that is not Jean. While it may look like her, it may sound like her, it's all just a ruse. But pretty much at this point, yeah, Venom says, like I said, Venom says they have to run. There is no use fighting these things. If they stay around long enough, the poisons will eventually get them all, so the best course of action is just to get while the getting's good. Good. As the Venom, the X-Men, and the Starjammers are running through Killer Thrill's ship, Beast is able to use his future tech to get in contact with Danger, because obviously their ship is going to be nearby. And so once it gets close enough, and they get to another hangar room, Venom has Cyclops and Iceman create a tunnel as Cyclops creates a hole in the ship, and Cyclops manages to use an ice wall or essentially uses ice powers to create a tunnel connecting one ship to the next. Unfortunately, though, in the time that took for them to do this, the poisons managed to catch up with them, and, well, even Venom admits they're not going to let them get across that ice tunnel. They want the symbiote, so it's not so yeah, they're not going to go down. However, Venom is able to convince the Starjammers to get to the other side of the ship, because after all they want are people with symbiotes, and since the Starjammers don't have symbiotes, that means they're off the poison's radar. As such, Corsair and the Starjammers take the hit and make a run for it, while Venom and the X-Men continue duking it out with the poisons. However, this is actually also part of Venom's plan, because you see, a battle is a little harder when there's no gravity. As such, Venom tells Cyclops to blast a hole in the ice cavern once the Starjammers get across, and sure enough, Cyclops says that he can do that, as he pretty much just lights up every cell of his body and just creates a giant concussive blast that does indeed completely destroy the ice bridge and causes a vacuum that ends up sucking everyone into space. Thankfully, though, everyone with a symbiote is saved, as their symbiotes managed to cover them up, give them their own oxygen supplies. It pretty much just protects them all. And likewise, the poisons, well, I don't even know if they use oxygen. The point is, they're fine too. And with them now just floating through space, it's now harder for the poisons to get a hold of anyone with a symbiote. Unfortunately, harder doesn't mean impossible, as any poisons that can get close to everyone do try to get close. As Killer Thrill and one of her men tried attacking Venom, but thankfully Venom is able to throw her off, and she even turned her hand into a spike to try and stab him, and then just broke it off and stabbed her man. Jean tried getting a hold of Cyclops, but he's able to use a concussive blast to force her off. And unfortunately, in the midst of space, a little poison wound up getting close to Angel, and sadly made contact with his back. And well, Angel, knowing full well exactly what will happen if he doesn't do anything, sadly has to sacrifice his symbiote as he ignites his wings in fire and burns it off, killing it and the poison. As such, I'm guessing he somehow holds his breath. Don't know why. I guess perspiration of space means jack shit to him. Or maybe the fire from his wings is hot enough. I don't know. I don't care. Basically, through comic book bullshit, he's able to survive in space, and so basically anyone that can, and basically he manages to grab whoever he can. Venom manages to web up Cyclops and bring him along, and so they're able to all fly back to Danger and get back. They're all able to fly back to Danger safe and sound, though unfortunately the poisons are still floating through space, and while the X-Men may have escaped them now, escape does not mean stopping. So, and as such, yeah, it's clear the poisons are, and so Venom even knows that if the poisons are here in this universe, then they're going to bring trouble, especially with what Venom saw of the other universe from Venomverse. As such, the comic then cuts back to the spaceport that we saw in the X-Men Blue annual issue, and we see that, well, with the Starjammer's rescue, they've managed to get back to their ship, and, well, with the mission now over, the X-Men have now parted ways with their symbiotes, as the Starjammers now have them in containers and have every intention of bringing them back to their home planet because, well, that's where they belong. And which, well, that's part of the reason why they're going to the Clintar home planet. That's the secondary reason is because, well, the poisons are here and they want symbiotes. Then those symbiotes are going to be in danger as well, so they want to warn them. They want to warn them. In the meantime, the X-Men realize they need to get back to Earth immediately because, well, thanks to Venom's experience, he knows that the poisons are here to cause trouble, so he believes that they need to go to Earth and warn everyone. However, before everyone parts ways, we do get this nice moment between Corsair and Scott, as Corsair, well, he's apologizing to Scott because, well, the whole reason that the X-Men were even in space was because Corsair had been captured and he asked for help. And he even tells Scott, look, I'm sorry, if I hadn't asked for your help, then Jean wouldn't have. But Scott pretty much cuts him off and says, "No, Dad, just don't." And so, as Corsair the Starjammers leave, Scott just kind of admits to himself, Jean wouldn't have had it any other way. It's tragic. It's tragic and actually some legitimately good pathos. It's nice. As such, Scott goes back to Danger, and while Venom is sympathetic to what Scott's going through because, well, he lost someone he loved, he also tells him that they don't really have a lot of time to grieve either because, like I said, the poisons are probably going to make their way to Earth, so they got to get there quickly. However, before Danger gets up and running, Scott sees a faint image, so to speak, an image of poisoned Jean just floating in the air looking at him. It's brief, only there for like maybe a second or two, but it causes him to notice. Venom, of course, sees this and even asks, hey, what's wrong? But Scott just admits that it's nothing. It's nothing. He's just seeing ghosts. And so Venom and the X-Men fly off, intent on going to Earth and warning the world's heroes about the poisons. However, that's not where the story ends. For in the last page of the comic, we cut back to Corsair and the Starjammers as they make their way back to the planet Clintar. And so once they arrive on the planet, they're just they touch down. They have the symbiotes in their canisters and like, okay guys, last stop for any symbiotes, welcome home. But upon arriving, they find nothing. Like, there is nothing on the planet, which is confusing for them because apparently the planet Clintar is supposed to be a heavily populated planet. They should be able, even just stepping off their ship, they should end up encountering some symbiotes, but yet they don't see anything. There's no one. There's nothing. It's like it's a ghost town, and sure enough, that mechanical fly thing, I forgot its name, confirms that that's more accurate than they believe, because it turns out there are no life forms on this planet. Nothing. There's nothing, no symbiotes, no other alien races, nothing. The planet's completely abandoned. And Corsair quickly realizes something horrifying. And the comic ends with him telling the Starjammers they need to contact the X-Men. Because it's clear that the poisons have been here, and they have captured every last symbiote. So, yeah. That's how Poison X ends. So, first, my thoughts on the issue before I give my thoughts on Poison X as a whole. Again, it's a very brief issue. That's kind of the consequence of having it be so short since it's part of an ongoing comic series. But I think it's still fine. This one definitely kind of takes... This one really kind of goes sideways into the whole everyone's kind of screwed kind of setup. Like, going back, like I said, the whole thing with Poison X was that for the most part, up until now, it felt like it was kind of following a rather formulaic story structure. Basically, loved one of the hero gets captured, and the heroes have to go and save him. They employ some extra help with Venom, and while we do get some cool stuff from it, like having the X-Men also bond with their own symbiotes in order to counter Killer Thrill and her men, otherwise everything kind of went the way you would expect it to from a superhero story like this. Which is not bad, but it is just pretty standard. Nothing too amazing, just the regular, just kind of what you would expect, so to speak. However, by introducing the poisons, it helped set up that there was something bigger going on. And this issue what really kind of drove that home. Because with the introduction of the poisons, everything involving Corsair and the Starjammers now becomes secondary. And throughout the comic, it's pretty much just a matter of getting the hell out of there. Because with the poisons on standby and with the X-Men all bonded with their own symbiotes, this pretty much just makes it clear that they need to run. That even throughout the whole thing, that you can see that Venom is just scared, worried. Of course, and even the narration throughout the comic is of the Venom symbiote, as it talks about the poisons, how it makes Eddie doubt their bond, how Eddie is angry because of how the poisons operate. Basically, it's just them. It's just basically putting this all into full panic mode because throughout the story, Venom has to continually hammer into the X-Men. We can't fight these things. The only course of action is to just run and avoid them like the plague. And throughout the story, it has that same bit of tension that we saw in Venomverse, because we know anyone can go. They set the standard for that with Jean Grey. And like I said, even though these are meant to be like time-displaced younger versions of the X-Men, that fact is not going to protect them right now. We saw that Jean has already been corrupted, and she's supposed to be a younger variant of the Jean Grey we know. So the fact that she's been absorbed by the poisons means that anybody can be taken. And so we see the X-Men try and utilize whatever means they can to try and stop the poisons from getting close. Iceman creates an ice wall, but with Killer Thrill on the poison side, she's able to break through that. Same with Jean's powers. Angel tries going on the offensive, but because his wings are so big, that essentially makes him a walking target, so he's now useless. Beast is, of course, big and strong, but again, big and strong still makes him a target. And, of course, then there's Killer Thrill and her men. And, of course, Killer Thrill will be more than happy to get the rest of her crew on their side, and because they're not main characters, of course they're going to go. So, yeah, the fact since they also get consumed as well, that makes the whole thing get bigger. That makes the threat grow larger, because the bad guys start growing their numbers just a little bit at a time. And because the numbers aren't on their side now, the X-Men really it's just a matter of survival. Having the X-Men do whatever they can. And so it becomes just a race, and so it just becomes a race. But basically a kind of, in a way, it's sort of like a war of attrition, just a matter of survival, as the X-Men have to just find a way to get off the ship before the poisons can get them. And ultimately, they do manage to get that, but it does take a bit of creativity to do, as it requires Venom blowing a hole, as it requires Venom, Cyclops, and Iceman blowing a hole in the ship, and then using that to their advantage to create a vacuum that can suck everyone into space. And even that doesn't turn into a foolproof solution, because even in space, the poisons are still trying to do a grab at getting everyone with a symbiote. Even Angel almost gets consumed as well, as a little poison gets in contact with him, and in order to save himself, he had to kill his symbiote, which, yeah, it does suck. That does admittedly suck, because even in the story they admitted that the symbiotes are only sticking with them because they kind of had a similar goal. But unfortunately, yeah, it was clear that if someone had to die, it was either Angel and his symbiote, or just the symbiote. And unfortunately, Angel's friends needed him, so he kind of had to get rid of the symbiote. It's kind of sad, but otherwise still kind of helps showcase the danger of dealing with the poison, so to speak. But I'm trying to think what else. I'm trying to think. On top of that, I love what I kind of love here, in a way, is the emotional turmoil we get in this part of the story. Because after all, as we've showcased with the poisons from Venomverse, being consumed by the poisons is essentially death. While the poisons may walk around with your powers, your face, your everything, they're not you. They're only some remnants of who you were in the being that they become. We saw that with Spider-Man, with Captain America, and even with Doctor Doom. While they still hold some remnants of the individual, they're ultimately now just a part of the poison collective. And as a result, the person that's walking around is, well, it's essentially just it's just a shadow of who they used to be. And so when Cyclops sees Jean consumed and learns exactly what being consumed by the poisons entails, it's actually kind of tragic. And we see Cyclops just kind of trying to not just Cyclops, but him and the other X-Men trying to come to terms with that, as they can't believe, like, when they see the poison Jean, they all cannot believe their eyes. And because, of course, this figure looks like Jean, they all hold out hope that maybe they can convince her, maybe they can get her to break free from whatever's controlling her. But there is no breaking free, because nothing's controlling her. Jean's gone. Any bits and pieces of who she was are lost are lost in the Poison Collective, and this drone walking around with her look, her powers, her everything, is only her in the barest sense of the word. It's honestly just, and the way we see the X-Men try wrapping their heads around this as they try and figure out, no, as they have to try and convince themselves that Jean is gone. It's hard. They all are just, all of them have trouble accepting it, especially Scott, because after all, he and Jean were in a romantic relationship, and when he learns that she's gone, he can't accept it. He can't even fully grasp it. And hold on one sec. Sorry about that. But anyway, yeah. Basically, seeing the X-Men, especially Scott, come to terms with it is really, it's very tragic. And I love how we see Scott trying to register it. Because of how the story goes along, well, he doesn't have time to properly register it. After all, there is still a major threat going on with the poisons, and as a result, while you can see that that the grief is eating him up, he has to try and stay strong because there's still work to do. The poisons are still out there, and according to Venom's testimony, they need to stop them. They're not just going to throw in the towel and say, I guess that they can't I guess we can't take them. Okay, let's go home. No, they're going to keep going. And Venom knows that as long as the poisons exist, they're a problem. So they have to go, so while they may have saved Corsair and Co., ultimately they still have a mission to do. They have to prioritize stopping the poisons. And so as a result, while Scott and the X-Men are grieving, they have to still stay strong because they know there's still a job to do. And I like how we kind of see that registered through the story, especially when Corsair and the Starjammers part ways with Scott, as Corsair tries to apologize for getting the X-Men involved, because after all, Jean only bonded with a symbiote because she was on a rescue mission with them, and well, she wouldn't gotten taken if she hadn't taken part. But Scott just shoots that down immediately as he tells him, no, Jean would have saved you would have done everything she could to save you. Don't blame yourself. I like that. I like that. It's a great way of showcase, and even when it showcases that, it's a nice kind of way of double way of showing Scott trying to stay strong for the sake of others, while also mourning Jean, because not only is he trying to say, no, it's okay, it's okay, we're the good guys, this is what we do, but it's also his way of saying Jean would have still done this even if it wasn't would have done this no matter what. Basically, just it's his way of he basically is just remembering the person she was, and you can tell remembering that is kind of tearing him up inside. It's tragic. It's very tragic, and it just kind of and it leaves a bittersweet taste in your mouth. But the good guys technically won in the end because they got what they wanted. They saved Corsair and Co., and they're no longer going to be turned in for a bounty. But in the process, they lost someone they cared about and are now made aware of an even greater threat that demands their immediate attention. So it's very bittersweet. Bittersweet, not made any better by the fact that at the very end of the story, when Corsair and the Starjammers return to the planet Clintar, they find that the planet is barren, and they realize the poisons did this, and that if they took all these symbiotes, that means that there's nothing. That means bad things. So I like that. I like that. As a result, I think that this issue is actually a good way to end the story, because while it does leave some things a bit unresolved, the main focus of this crossover, namely saving Corsair and the Starjammers, is ultimately accomplished. So there is still some victories in there, but like I said, there's also a fair bit of bittersweetness laced throughout the comic. The heroes have been made aware of a greater threat. They lost someone they cared about in the process, and we know that the poisons are out to get another plan to increase their ranks because they've managed to capture every single symbiote from Clintar, which is most likely why Poison Craven broke out Haze Mancer, since, well, he's adept at capturing symbiotes, so odds are while they were off doing their own thing over here with the X-Men, Haze Mancer was back on Clintar and capturing as many symbiotes as he could, most likely with Poison assistance, because after all, even he's just one guy. I doubt even with all of his robots, he'd be able to capture every single symbiote on that planet. So I think the Poisons gave him a bit of assistance. So there you go. My point is this. The point is this. I think it's a good ending because it brings to it, because ultimately at the end of the day, Poison X, the Poison X storyline, while having an ultimate point with saving Corsair and Co., was meant to be kind of like a bridge from Venomverse to the next storyline in our list. And as a bridge, I think it does it well because, well, I guess I can get my full thoughts on the story I think Poison X is a pretty good story. Like I said, up until the poisons enter the fray, it feels like your standard superhero story. The good guys are on a rescue mission to save someone close to them. Corsair and the Starjammers. In a way, the setup is very formulaic for what you can expect from superhero comics. Just bad guys doing things, heroes have to go in and stop said things. But like with most superhero stories, they try and make the most of it as best as they can. We do have some good emotional drama with Scott being worried about his dad, and of course the turmoil that comes from knowing that he's a time-displaced version of himself, and that ultimately whatever time he has with his dad will be forgotten, so he tries to make the most of it while he can. I like the drama with Jean as she feels like something's not right, which is a good way of building up to the poisons. I love the ultimate reunion of Scott and his father, and they still try to work in some very creative setups, from just having Venom and the X-Men team up and have to go into space together. I like seeing them explore the Ulgriat spaceport. I like seeing Venom and the X-Men work off of each other, because the X-Men are basically the standard good guys, while Venom is an angry anti-hero / villain who's only really working with the X-Men because they forced him to, and because his symbiote wanted to help them. So I love that chemistry, but of course because of course the story involves symbiotes, we also see something really cool with the X-Men bonding with their own symbiotes. And like I said, I love the designs of the X-Men when they're bonded with their symbiotes. I love how the symbiotes augment them. I love how they look like monsters, but you can also see how strong they are. I love the ways that the symbiotes improve their powers and abilities, and I think it's really cool, and it's the same thing I actually liked from Venomverse. Seeing the Venomized versions of the X-Men and how being Venomized alters who they are and improves their own abilities and so on and so forth. That's what I love when you have symbiote stories. Just seeing kind of the creativity in the designs and what the symbiotes will do to the hosts. And we see everything that's done well in the story. But of course, we have to talk about the villains. Haze Mancer is an alright villain. He's basically just a standard bounty hunter who's there for the cash and nothing more, mate. But then you got Killer Thrill, and I love Killer Thrill. Killer Thrill is again one of those villains that's evil and loving it. Even when she's converted to the poisons, it's clear that the parts of Killer Thrill that love causing pain and being a complete and utter bitch are still in there, and it's enjoyable. She's honestly enjoyable. While she can be one of those written off villains who basically is just there to be a standard intergalactic bounty hunter who likes hurting people. She's fun. She's actually a fun villain. Fun villain to at least read about. When I was reading through her issues and I was reading her dialogue, I was having fun. I was having fun just kind of imagining her inflections as she toyed with people and just treated torture as if this was their love language. This was how they communicated. This was how they got intimate. It's just creepy, but just kind of fun to kind of just kind of see it go around and seeing her just revel and have a ball with it. I liked it. It was fun. It was fun. And of course, the addition of the poisons, I think, is a great way to help showcase that this story was meant to be a bridge between a bridge between storylines. As like I said, the introduction of the poisons throws a monkey wrench into the story. As from there, once they enter the fray, it becomes an entirely different beast because as we saw in Venomverse, the poisons are basically out for conquest, and they want to increase their own ranks with symbiote hosts to make themselves stronger. And because their plans to do that were foiled in Venomverse, we now see that they're going to Plan B, as they are now just straight up targeting anyone with a symbiote, as we saw them just zero in on the X-Men and Killer Thrill and Co. Because ultimately they all had symbiotes at the time, and they all have their own different kinds of powers and abilities. So of course they're viable material to join the Poison Collective. So I like doing that. And so I like kind of seeing them kind of go into the fray, and the poisons still carry the same weight that they do in Venomverse, because the instant they show up, anyone with a symbiote needs to run. After all, and they still further establish that anyone can go, as so one of the first people that we see get taken in the story is Jean Grey. So I love the way that they kind of implement that in the I love the way they implement that in the comic, and the way they kind of keep the stakes going as the X-Men see Jean are now turned to the poisons and partially want to help her, but have to kind of come to terms with the fact that there is no helping her. She's done. She's gone. They need to just run for it and get out while the getting's good. I like that. It creates a great bit of drama, and with the way the story ends, with the X-Men, with Venom and the X-Men just getting away at the end, the poisons not being stopped, it lets you know that the threat is not over, with the stakes once again being raised with the revelation that the poisons have gotten all the symbiotes on Clintar, and well, considering how they want to have the symbiotes, it's clear that they're going to be doing something it's clear that something dangerous is going to be going down soon, and well, the heroes of Earth have to best prepare themselves. So on the whole, I think Poison X is a pretty good story. I like what it said. Basically, like I said, up until the poisons show up, it's pretty standard formulaic, but they do try and get as much creativity as they can out of the scenario, with having good character interactions, creative environments, some really cool set pieces and plot developments, like with emotional stuff, like with emotional character stuff, and seeing the X-Men bond with their symbiotes. I love the stuff with Scott and his father and the Starjammers. I love the inclusion of the poisons and how it ties back into Venomverse. How that ties it back into Venomverse. I love how the way the story ends. I love the drama that comes from it. That comes from not only trying to save Corsair and Co., but also from encountering the poisons and what that entails. And the ending, I think, is a really good way of getting your attention, while ultimately the point of the story, saving Corsair and Co., was accomplished, there's still something greater on the horizon, and so they need to go deal with that, which leads directly into the next storyline we'll be looking at. So on the whole, I think Poison X is a pretty good story. Nothing grand, nothing spectacular, nothing grand, but still something that gets the job done. Sets the stage for the grander story. And on the whole, was dotted and decked with a bunch of cool set pieces, good villains, good characters, good action, and on the whole, was just pretty entertaining. So yeah, I liked it. It was enjoyable. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. So I do hope you enjoyed my inane ramblings for this video, and we're nearing the end of the Venomverse era in these comics, because the next miniseries we'll be looking at will be the final miniseries in this part of the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. And well, this one's gonna be fun. Because next time we meet, we're gonna see what the Poison's backup plan is, and well, I think it's time that we see what happens to the Marvel Universe when it gets venomized. So, till then, I hope you have a good Saturday. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, take care.